Evening. Ms. Clerk.
Worship, the first item on the agenda are the minutes of the Strategic Priorities Administration and Protective Services Standing Committee meeting held Monday, December 14th, and the recommendation is that the committee approve those minutes.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Second item is a report of General Manager Corporate Services regarding an application for a permanent change to a liquor license for a food primary establishment, the Golden Onion Restaurant Limited at 3055 Anson Avenue. The staff recommendation is that the committee consider the application by the Golden Onion Restaurant for a permanent change to their liquor license and approve one of the two alternatives. Either direct that a public consultation process be initiated at the cost of the applicant in order to determine the neighborhood response and comment on this application, or opt out of commenting on the application, noting that General Manager of the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch may choose to conduct its own process to gather the views of the residents and consider the regulatory criteria.
Staff recommendation has been read out. Is there a mover?
I'll move recommendation 1.
Councillor Reid moves, or Councillor Reamer moves recommendation 1. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it for discussion.
Councillor Robinson seconds for discussion. And I've got two speakers, and I trust that it's on recommendation number 1, Councillor Reid and Councillor Lynch. Councillor Reid. Actually, before that, for the audience at home, this isn't explained in the agenda, but this is the proposal of putting a karaoke system related to a neighborhood pub. Councillor Reid.
It's to change from food primary to liquor primary. I don't remember seeing karaoke anywhere in here. However, I'm not reading too well today. I have difficulty with this, and the one question I have through you, Your Worship, to staff is that if we give option number 2 and we opt out of commenting, the Liquor Control Branch does not have to go out for public consultation, correct? They can choose not to. They can just choose to pass it. Is that correct?
Through the chair, as I understand it, the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch has laid out these two options in terms of the City of Coquitlam and City Council providing some input as it relates to their own decision-making process around these applications and moving forward. One of their options is to have their own public input process, but I don't think that's necessary. I believe that they're able to approve or not approve based on whatever information that they've received up till then. I suspect if they were inclined to approve it, that they would have some sort of public consultation process, though.
Well, the fact that they can opt out of choosing to do any kind of a process would make me go to number 1 then. And if it's karaoke, I want that stressed in whatever consultation that we go out with. We've already had enough problems with one of those in our community as it is. So I am definitely not in favor of either of these options. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Well, I was reading in the report there, I was noting, it says that never, as a city council, supported any of the previous applications for a food primary establishment for patron participation and entertainment, nor request extension of the hours. It's extension of the liquor hours that I remember having discussions before, and I'm not in favor of extending liquor hours past 12 a.m. I note that the RCMP in the report have also expressed concern about karaoke establishments in general, and I, like Councillor Reid, I'm not in favor of this proposal, but I'm a little unclear. Can we opt out and provide comments to the? We can't. No, that's what I thought. So if we opt out, then it goes directly to the liquor board. If we go to option number 1, then we can have a consultation and express our disapproval if we wanted to. And if we don't do either one of these two options, what's the? Yeah, we have to do one of these, do we not? Or
through the chair, if council wanted to provide some comments to the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch, but not have the public consultation process, I suspect the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch would receive that information and incorporate that into their thinking, and then decide from there whether or not further public consultation was warranted. It's not one of the methods of consulting with local government that's explicitly laid out, though. Essentially, the two options are local government goes out and consults, or local government opts out. And I think what we're talking about is sort of a third option, which isn't articulated by the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch, but I'm sure they would read a staff report and a letter as input if that's what council requested.
Thank you. That clarifies it a little bit. I do recall making providing some comments to Liquor Control and Licensing Branch, but I just couldn't recall whether we went through a process first or not. I would prefer to just simply tell the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch that we are not in favor of this, although I think that perhaps to do that we would need to go up to a public consultation. Either way, at this stage, my opinion is that with the opinions expressed by the RCMP, the discussions we've had in the past where we haven't extended hours for liquor service to anyone prior, that I would be still, my opinion would still be to be consistent with our past practice.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I just want to point out in the strategic goal, a corporate objective, is not only enhancing community safety, but it's also economic development. That the fact that these folks are looking to extend hours and change the nature of their businesses, I think an economic opportunity. Given that, I think from my perspective, I want to hear from the public. I have my own thoughts, but I also want to hear from the folks who live, and I think it's, 400 meters? Is that who we go out to?
It's 400 feet.
400 feet.
Yeah.
So
It would result in about 391 letters going out, and 250 of those would be to business operations.
okay. I'd like to hear from them. So that's why I decided to second the...
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I too have concerns about this, but I moved option 1 because I thought that is a process that we owned and we could either approve or decline after public consultation takes place. I do have concerns, but I certainly think it would be worthwhile and only fair, actually, to the proponent to take this process forward and do the public consultation. So that's why I moved option number 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I would like to know how they can even apply to the Liquor Control Board for any kind of a change in their status when they don't even have a business license.
Through the chair, as I understand it, the license application has been made. There's been some deficiencies that have been identified, and the applicant is working through those. And this isn't that uncommon when there's a change in tenancy and a new business is locating in the city. And as long as they're making progress on the deficiency list, I'm told this isn't uncommon. So,
Well, it may not be uncommon, but it certainly shows the type of corporate citizen that we're getting, and it's not impressive so far. I don't want to bring another business into our community that's just going to cause us a lot more RCMP time. It makes no sense whatsoever to me. So however we can get that across to the province, however best we can get that across to the province, I would do it. And I would also suggest maybe, can we broaden the notification to all those apartments that are on Heffley and right behind on Glen there? Those are the people that they're going to be annoying. Those are the people that the other karaoke that we have the problems with. So that's to you, Mr. Wingrove.
You can recommend sort of an advanced public consultation opportunity so you can increase the width, but Council has previously approved a public consultation process that dictates the 400 square feet, but you can definitely, by resolution, extend that if you like.
Well, the reason I would do it is because the 400 square feet takes into account more businesses that are only open during business hours and not in the middle of the night when the annoyances would be taking place.
Through the chair, as part of the public consultation process, there's also a requirement for advertising in the newspaper as well. And so there would be a more general appeal to anyone in the community to provide input. But the specific written notice, there is that limit, as Carrie indicated. So we'd certainly be willing and happy to accept input from others, though.
Okay, so because I'm so vehemently opposed to this, how can I best protect my public? By voting for number 1 and forcing them to do this public consultation, or by turning this down? And if we turn it down here, that means the province can override it anyhow.
With
Mr.
clarification, turning it down isn't on the floor. It's not among the staff recommendations, and our only options at this point are to approve or disapprove of a public consultation process, as I understand it. Mr. Steblin had a comment.
The only thing that I would comment, if you did not want to go through the public consultation process, that you'd already pretty well made up your minds in terms of not wanting to support it, an option, and I think Trevor alluded to that, rather than describing it as a third option, I would describe it as a slightly revised words to number 2, which would be opt out of commenting on the application. I was going to suggest by opt out of the process by writing to the province and attaching this copy of this report along with explanations as to why you do not feel it is appropriate to go forward at this time.
I could certainly support that.
But the question I would have, formally, legally, are we to opt out of commenting on the, as opposed to just opt out of the process? So I would simply, as Trevor said originally, and he described it as his third option, is simply provide explanation as to our thought process. So in a written letter that would go to the province opting out, we would explain why and some of the feelings that have been expressed around this table.
Okay, I'm just going to read one line that I think might clarify this. This is the first paragraph on page 2, Liquor Control Act, we'll call it regulations. Allow local governments to provide comment on changes to liquor licenses that involve a change in hours or patron participation entertainment. Local governments are asked to give consideration to the potential for noise, traffic, and impact on the community of the proposed changes, and are required to conduct a public process to gather input on these matters from nearby residents if the local government considers that the amendment may affect them. So I'm wondering, if we don't consider that the amendment will affect them, obviously we do in this case, that's the only time when we can opt out of having this public comment, and if we intend to comment on the application. Is that pretty fair? I mean, it seems to me at this point we have no choice but to go forward with a public comment process because we intend to provide our comments to liquor licensing officials, and our comments will, without presupposing what council will decide, will likely be no. But the way to do that is to go through a public process to get stuff to back it up. Is that the case, Mr. Wingrove?
Through the chair, that is the way that it is laid out explicitly in the legislation. That if you wanted to comment, that there would be a public consultation requirement in order to provide those comments, and otherwise you wouldn't have the opportunity to comment. Those are the two options that are explicitly laid out, and I suppose if council did not want to proceed with public consultation, we could provide the comment in any event, and the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch could do whatever they chose to do with it. But explicitly, according to the legislation, there is a requirement for public consultation prior to providing those comments.
And fair enough, not to put too fine a point on it, the last sentence of that paragraph says, alternatively, that's the alternative to what I just said, a local government may decide not to provide comment or recommendations on license amendment applications, but is asked to pass a resolution indicating that it does not wish to provide comment. And the way we'd have to word that is, we don't wish to provide comment, and here are our comments. Yeah. Councillor Reamer. Councillor Reid first. Sorry, are you done? Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I don't think that, so we don't have the ability to simply say no, do we, at this time? We don't.
According to the legislation, in order to comment that council does not support the application, there's supposed to be a public consultation process associated with it.
So we cannot say no now. And if we do the last sentence of paragraph 2, but is asked to pass a resolution indicating that it does not wish to provide comment on this application, then we give up our ability to provide feedback and leave it up to the government, basically. Or we go through the public consultation process, and we still have the ability after that process to decline this.
Through the chair, you're really commenting whether or not you support or not support it. The decision to approve it or decline it is left with the province of British Columbia through the Liquor Control and Licensing
Okay,
Branch.
that's where I needed the clarification. Thank you.
Declining it is not our option. It's their
Thank you.
option. Our recommendation, their option.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Robinson.
So the short end of this is if we want to have our say, we need to do a public consultation, and then we get to have our say as part of that public consultation. So I think that given what I've heard around the table, call the vote, I think we have support for this public consultation. So we call the vote.
That's not how it works. There are no other speakers, so I will call the vote. Oh, there is. Councillor Reid.
I want to expand it to where the residents are. Simply because of the location of this, I want to know if we can expand it to where the residences are, because they're the people that will find it the nuisance. Is there anything in the Act that says we can't do that? Okay,
I hear an amendment coming.
that's it.
And the amendment is to how many meters or feet?
To include...
I see our clerk waving. Yes.
We could provide amendment language when this comes before council,
Yeah.
giving us time to actually determine that.
Thank you, because there's only one little enclave of residences that even are affected, and that's Heffley and Glen in there. Thank you.
So there is no amendment on the floor. Staff are directed to come up with language that might satisfy a council's resolution, an amendment next week. Anybody else? No. Question is the option number 1, without amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is a report of the City Clerk related to the 2010 by-election, and the recommendation is that the committee receive the report for information.
Moved by Councillor Reamer. Second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Reid.
Well, I'm upset that it's going to take till April for a voting day. I just find that just unbelievable. But I know there's all these special things that the clerk's office has to get up to in order to make it comply with all the legislation. But more importantly than that, I understand that the provincial government is looking to consider to revise the Local Government Act to deal with some flexibility with respect to dealing with by-elections. And because of the cost of this, I am really concerned that we pass this and start moving forward immediately when we perhaps could move a motion that would help us put this off just to find out if we can avoid the cost of holding a by-election by leaving the seat vacant, or by some other means, perhaps letting the highest number of votes for that particular segment, i.e. it would be those running for council, the next person in line we could automatically seat them if they were so interested, or leaving the seat totally vacant. But I think the government, if they are looking at this, I would think I would like to deal with that first.
So the motion, if we put forward a motion that we ask staff to inquire of government as to whether that's possible.
Yes, and to ask them to confirm if they are revising the Local Government Act to deal with this, and if they are, to advise us when they figure there will be an outcome of some sort.
Okay. Motion's on the floor. Is there a seconder?
I'll second for discussion.
Councillor Reamer seconds. Councillor Reid, do you have anything further? Okay. Councillor Lynch? You might not be on the motion. You might be on the original.
I'll comment on this one. I remember when we were at UBCM and this was brought forward that it was going to be a review, but I don't know that it was really mainly to do with by-elections, and I guess I'm open to review, but I have a bit of a problem with the idea that you would be perhaps calling a by-election halfway through a term and you're going back to people who may have been the highest, the next person in line, that person may have moved away by then, and then what do you do? So there's all sorts of complications. Yeah, well, I think probably the process that's most democratic is to have an election, even if it does cost money. There might be a way to reduce the amount of cost, or perhaps not have the cities held responsible for cost. Perhaps the budget of a provincial government would be able to provide some type of a fund in the event, because there's going to be all sorts of communities much smaller than Coquitlam, for instance, and more, that would need to have a by-election, wouldn't be able to afford this, and so it might be a way of having some type of fund or something that municipalities could apply to for a grant process or something.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer?
Well, I agree with Councillor Reid on this, and actually in one of the last Municipal World magazines I read, they profiled the province of Ontario, and in the province of Ontario they do have the two options of appointing or holding an election. Having said that, I want to ask the question of staff. Councillor Donnelly handed his resignation in, I believe it was effective November 23rd. Forgetting about the fact that the government may be reviewing their processes in this regard, are we not required to hold an election within a certain period of time after Councillor Donnelly resigns?
Mr. Steblin.
The legislation, as it's presently worded, says that we must appoint a chief election officer as soon as reasonably possible, or some words along those lines. And once so there's some flexibility in the timing of appointing the chief election officer. Once that decision has been made, then it's an absolute 80-day window. Everything goes into high gear.
Oh, okay.
You cannot simply not appoint a chief electoral officer unless you have another plan, unless you have other kinds of issues. And as I understand it, the motion on the floor would be to engage the province in a process to try to get some answers from them as to what they would consider reasonable in this kind of situation. If what is their committee, and I believe there's a task force set up that one of our MLAs is part of, that is looking at these kind of issues. If that motion passed, what we would do as administration is contact that committee, ask them, are they considering alternate language with respect to by-elections? It's very costly for us. Are they considering something in the near future? Would it apply to us? Under what conditions would it apply to us? Presumably they would want to have the council demonstrate by some significant majority or process that they wanted to do something different. We would engage the province, that committee, in that kind of discussion and report back before or at the same time as the report that would appoint the chief election officer, and then council could make a decision at that point, at that time. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councillor Reid, and I guess her question just a second ago was, what's the time frame? I guess my question is, can we get an answer relatively quickly? And I suspect we can. The answer might be, no, there's nothing you can do, in which case we're back to where we were. But there is, I suspect, a possibility that if the provincial government is looking at these issues, this is a tough year for our taxpayers. It's a tough year for our government, and it's $250,000. And I suspect that we all read letters to the editor to the effect. We've heard from our constituents that say, why on earth are you going to spend $250,000 and essentially lay off 3 firefighters and have a by-election, lay off 3 police officers and have a by-election, close the pools or the libraries on Sundays and have a by-election? It doesn't. I have some serious concerns about the cost of this. I'm concerned that the taxpayer isn't very well served by this. So I will support the motion, because I think what we end up with then is some clear direction as to whether it's possible to avoid the cost of the by-election. And if it isn't possible, then we're exactly where we were, and I don't think it's going to be, I don't think we'll be even delayed particularly. I think we're exactly where we were, and we appoint a chief election officer, and we incur $250,000 to have a by-election. I'm hoping that there's another way to do it. Perhaps Councillor Reid's motion will achieve that, and I'll be in support. Councillor Robinson.
Well, I appreciate Councillor Reid's creativity, and I too will support it. Although I have to say, I don't think this they're going to be moving very quickly. So I'm not hopeful that we'll get a response that we're looking for. But don't ask, don't get. It's my philosophy. So I think we owe it at least to our citizens to ask the question and to see if maybe there is a bit of room here. But I'm not going to hold my breath. I think we're going to have to do a by-election. Maybe not.
Well, I wasn't going to suggest anyone hold their breath on this one. Okay, and seeing no other commenters, the motion is as Councillor Reid Councillor Reid moved, Councillor Reamer seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you.
That concludes the items on the formal agenda.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. We're going to go back to that item. We didn't receive it. We only accepted a motion that intervened.
Committee
And my
meeting, you can
apologies. The
receive
chair probably should not have accepted the motion until we at least voted on receiving it. The motion is to receive. All in favor? On receipt of the report.
It is on the report.
On receipt of the report, Councillor Lynch.
It was just a quick question. I wanted to know, we've had many by-elections in the past. I'm wondering if this is consistent, the time frame from the time a councillor is resigned to the time that the election happens. To me, this seems a little bit extended, and I'm curious, and I would just like to know if we could get that information as to whether this is considerably longer than it's taken in the past to call a by-election when we had a resignation, or if it is consistent time-wise.
We can certainly provide that information in the report back. Off the top of my head, this is a little bit longer because we did have some discussions at the staff level, and if we had brought a report forward today actually recommending there would be significant conflicts with the Olympics and that kind of thing, and the general discussion that we had was that having a by-election during the Olympics probably was not a good idea, so we did not bring forward the report before the summer, before Christmas break. And then now, then we looked at, the clerk looked at a variety of schedules and felt that if we were going to avoid the Olympics, then there was Easter. Then that's where he came up with the date of February 15th, actually a point, and then he counted the 80 days, and that's where he came up with April 24th. So it is somewhat longer than the past, but we're in a different situation with the Olympics and that kind of stuff than in the past. I don't know if that's an adequate explanation, or do you want that written down as part of the final?
Oh, no. I mean, some of that information is the report already. I was just, when I was reading the paper, I was looking at Anmore and when they were going to have their by-election date, and opposed to when we are, and I've had some queries on myself of that, so I thought I'd ask a question.
Yeah, I would just support what the city manager has said, and there's kind of two sets of variables. There's the variables of when you want the public to come out and vote, and some of its advanced voting opportunities. We're doing them during spring break. You're not getting the benefit that you would like. Secondly, there's some technical date considerations found in the Election Act that we have to meet as well, and again, it's about providing the opportunity for those to land at the right time.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Ms. Clerk.
That concludes the formal agenda.
Thank you very much. A motion to adjourn would be in order. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you all, and I hope you all enjoy